Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm Frozen with Outdoor Adventures, and this
is Marika.
And we hiked the Appalachian Trail together in 2019, but also we both hiked the PCT separately in 2024. Now I went NOBO.
And I went SOBO.
I started on April 12th.
And I started July 3rd.
And I thought it would be kind of cool to get together while he's visiting me today and do a video about which way should you hike the PCT? Is NOBO the best? Is SOBO the best? We don't really know, but after today, we should have a definitive guide to which way you should go. So we got a couple topics. This is just going to be a talking heads, drink some beer in the basement video. So cheers, buddy.
Cheers.
Let's do this. So traveling to the trail was pretty easy for me. They actually have a shuttle that goes from the San Diego airport all the way to Campo. And then it's just a quick walk to the border. Now, how was your experience? Because I know it was very different from mine.
It was, yeah. So getting to the trail when you are starting at the Canadian border, a lot more difficult. So I flew from the East Coast. I'm from North Carolina, as you might be able to tell. So I flew 2 flights. I think I flew through Washington, D.C. To get to Seattle. And then took a series of 4 different buses all day long. Like started my journey at like 9 a.m., on July 2nd, got to Mazama, which is the most northern town closest to the Harts Pass trailhead, at like 6 or 7 o'clock at night. Stayed at the Lion's Den hostel that evening, woke up for the first shuttle, which I think was at like 6 a.m. So I was there for all of like 12 hours, and then got a shuttle up to Harts Pass to then have to walk 30 miles northbound to get to the Canadian border. So logistically, getting to the Canadian border at the start of the trail, much more difficult.
It sounds like it's much harder. And as far as weather, when I arrived, the first section you hit for the first 700 odd miles is called the desert. It was very lush and green when I got there. It had a lot more rain, a lot more snow than any year that I can remember following people on YouTube. So my weather was pretty perfect until I got about 700 miles in. How about yours?
Yeah, my weather was also perfect. I think I had a total of about 30 minutes of rain in the entirety of Washington, which their PR department needs work because all I knew about the Northwest, especially the Pacific Northwest, is that it was rainy. That was not my experience. But yeah, I mean, I hit a heat wave, relatively early on, which did a lot to help melt a lot of the existing snow. I was on sort of the front edge when I started of people like just starting to feel comfortable like traveling, especially from Stehekin to Stevens Pass because of the snowpack and stuff. But for me, like the snow wasn't an issue. It was slushy in parts. I was post-holing up to like my calves in some parts. But yeah, weather-wise, like either lucked out or just southbound like sets up well for weather.
Now, when you got a few hundred miles in, did that weather continue for you? Because I know in my case, after I got into the Sierra, which we arrived May 22nd,
okay,
our weather was perfect going in, and then we were in a heat wave. So we had a lot of snow melt, a lot of slush.
Yeah.
Basically, if you didn't get where you were going by like 10 or 11 a.m., you were going to have a long, long day post-holing. How was, say 700 miles in, where were you at that point? Do you remember?
So 700 miles in, it's basically like halfway through Oregon. So I've gotten past, Rainier and Adams, Hood, all of those, sort of major volcanic peaks.
Beautiful areas.
Oh my gosh, just spectacular. Like I loved all of Washington, all of Oregon. So yeah, like let's call Crater Lake, and I don't remember the exact miles, but let's call Crater Lake, roughly that 700 miles going southbound because it's going to be close enough.
Yeah.
I had 1 night of rain, / a little bit of hail. But then, weather-wise, like it really wasn't an issue for me. Like all of the sort of snow melts just meant that I had water sources. But yeah, no major like creek or stream crossings that were sketchier that, I was really concerned about. Temperature wise, outside of that heat wave, which was, pretty miserable hiking uphill and stuff. Super lucked out. The only weather I really dealt with was when I got to the desert, because all that snow melt had already dissipated and run off and all of that. I had far fewer water sources.
Less water.
Yeah, from what it sounds like than you did in the desert.
Yeah. My desert experience was, I think the max carry we had, there was a couple places where you went to cache.
Yeah.
And I did not like relying on other people to, hydrate me. I didn't like doing that, but literally you had to, because you had 20 miles and another like 19 after that with just 2 caches in the middle of it. But when I got to Washington, I still felt like I had great weather. Yes, it was a lot colder than when I started, but my only weather issues occurred in the Sierra because of the heat wave.
Yeah.
So maybe doing, and every year you're going to have a different kind of snowpack, different kind of snowballs. I mean, look at the guys, what was it, a year ago or 2 years ago? They had like 300% snow levels, average snow.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact percentage, but 2022 was especially high. And so then that following year for 2023, people had to completely skip the Sierra section or, maybe come back to it at the end of their trail or come back out this year. And I actually saw a lot of those people.
Yeah, me too, filling in their gaps that they missed. Yeah.
And I think what was interesting is I had seen a lot of people before the Sierras on the trail filling in gaps from fire closures.
Right.
But these were people filling in the Sierra gap because they just couldn't go through, the year that they were doing it.
Now, in the Sierra, when we hit the snow melt and the heat wave, I felt like I learned the most. First of all, I learned the most through that entire section. Like, I had never done a lot of snow travel. I've camped in the snow. I put a tent in the, tent stakes in the snow and covered them up. That was the extent of my, if you want to call it mountaineering, low-end mountaineering experience. But in this case, in mine, I relied on my ice axe a lot. I had my micro spikes on probably 50 to 60% of the time, just in normal travel. The water levels caused me to, really like dig in with my trekking poles. I had never seen, 200, 300 miles that the Sierra taught me as far as skill-wise. And I think if you're going early, as I did in early to mid-April, I should say, you're going to learn a lot about yourself and snow travel in general. I mean, there was passes that, like, if you didn't do the right thing, you were going to have to either start over or you're going to get seriously injured by hitting a rock or a tree or, just obstacles in the way. And I think that might have been a little different in your case.
It was.
So go ahead and... Did you ever feel in danger, I guess? Because I felt in danger many times when I got to the Sierra.
No, especially not in the Sierra.
Okay.
And I know we're going to talk about the Sierra specifically in a little bit. But no, I never felt in danger. I think I have a little bit more backcountry experience than frozen.
Yeah, you do.
Especially comfortability like in the snow and on steep terrain and stuff like that. But yeah, so I never felt in danger. There were definitely times where I recognized it as what I call the don't mess up zones.
Yeah. You're going to die here, son. Yeah.
Yeah. So right. I mean, there are definitely those sections, none that felt super sketchy for me. Again, I was on like sort of that leading edge of people going out when it was first starting to feel comfortable for a lot of people. So I think had my start date been even like a week or especially 2 weeks sooner, then I would have had a lot more of those.
So you're talking like late June, you think might have been way more skill level involved.
Yeah. So southbound permits open up starting for June 15th, I believe. So yeah, if you're in that like first week, maybe first 2 weeks, and especially if it's been a high snow year the year before, then you probably will need some of that, true mountaineering experience with an ice axe and potentially self-arrest, stuff like that.
Which I did have to do once. Yes.
Oh, I want to hear about that.
Oh, I will. I was on Forester, yeah.
Okay.
After Forester,
but yeah, I wore my micro spikes exactly once.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was
completely different in my experience.
Yeah, and so it was going over Rock Pass, going out to the Canadian border.
Okay.
And I might have been able to get away without actually needing them on.
Yeah.
Comfortability-wise, safety-wise, I was glad I had them. But literally, the snow was melting so fast that by the time I came back the next day over Rock Pass, it was slushy enough that the micro spikes weren't going to be doing anything anyway. So yeah, that was literally the only time I used them, and it was for 30 minutes maybe.
Interesting. Yeah, I kept all I think I said already, 50 to 60% of the time in the Sierra, especially in the morning, which we loved hiking in the morning because we could scoot along the ice that had refrozen overnight. But like come the afternoon, it was just a slog. It was a mental and physical drain.
Yeah.
I was so tired by like 1 or 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I'm the kind of guy that I hike until like 7 p.m. sometimes, wake up early, do 20 to 25 miles a day. That's like comfortable for me. But in the Sierra, we were like happy to get 13. That was like, let's celebrate. You know what I mean? It was a rough trip. But I will say, as a bonus to this, I met a lot of people that started in March when we got to the Sierra. And they were a few hundred miles ahead of us. Someone flipped back and they said, oh yeah, the Sierras were completely easy because the snow was frozen. So I do think a lot of my skill or danger level had to do with just the weather we were having on May 22nd and on.
Sure.
Let's switch gears and get into fires because I know this was a big thing for both of us. I think I missed approximately 350 miles, somewhere around there, and you missed about 300. I think,
it was also right around there. So I actually didn't have a fire closure of the trail until I got to the Mount Thielsen area, which, if you're unfamiliar, is sort of just north of Crater Lake. I got ahead of literally all of the Washington fires, whereas people behind me didn't get that fortunate. And so I was able to do a road walk around that. Don't recommend. Walked a lot of highways. It wasn't a safety concern. It was just, looking back now that I had to miss more than that, it's like, I don't enjoy walking along a highway. It's not scenic. It's not pretty. It's not particularly challenging. But gas stations for food are nice. So it has its benefits. My timing literally ended up being perfect for the entire northern portion. And then when I got down further south, it was either the bridge fire or the line fire. They started at the same time, were both causing issues on the trail. One of them was continuing to cause issues and continuing to cause a closure. And at that point, I did just decide to skip that fire section. And because I was so far into the trail at that point, use it as a way of being able to more definitively pick my end date. I ended up missing more of the trail than I strictly had to, with where the closures were and everything. But for ease of getting back out to be able to do the section again, sort of expanded that a little bit. Fires cause an issue for me. They definitely cause an issue for you. Yeah,
at one point I was actually running from a fire and trying to get around 2 fires in front of us at the same time.
Lovely.
Now, we did stay with a whole bunch of firefighters in Etna, because that was the first fire skip that we had to do. We went from pretty much 20 miles before Etna Summit. So before Etna, we stayed with some firefighters that night in a bed and breakfast. And they said, we can't believe they're starting this early, which was surprising to me because I chose an earlier start date in April compared to a lot of people started in May just to avoid the Sierra snow. And I'm like, I'm going to beat these fires. I'm going to be one of the first people in many, many years to get this whole thing done. And they just started early. So you can't control anything on the trail when it comes to fires. But we did the AT as purists. Yeah. Which, if you want to explain what that means to anybody that doesn't know.
So the purest way of doing a long trail is hiking every step or seeing every blaze, basically starting from one end of a long trail and hiking a continuous footpath to the other end. That's the way that we did the AT. Now, I wasn't as particular, for if I went into a shelter site and then cut back up to the trail. Some people will mark, where they got off trail, go pee or go to a shelter site. Where I definitely wasn't that level. I don't think anybody in our family was, but those people are definitely out there. It is just so hard to do that on the PCT in general.
I did at least. I met some purists out there that ended up hiking the road, or even in the Sierra there was a giant bridge out near the San Joaquin River or whatever it is. And, they just looked like they were through war whenever they crossed us. And that's just, with a family back home, that wasn't something that I was willing to risk.
Sure.
Had I been single, maybe I might have thought about it more than nope, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. And I think for me, so that was my biggest shift and takeaway, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I really gained on the PCT was being able to let go of that.
Yeah.
Because I think, and I was guilty of this too, but the people that hike in a purist fashion can sometimes be and come off as a little bit elitist or a little bit
cocky, kind of.
Yeah,
That's what I got from it.
Cocky, gatekeeping, stuff like that. And again, like I was probably guilty of that as well, which, so sorry if I offended anybody out there. But yeah, like on the PCT, I realized like I don't need anybody else's validation of saying like, oh, yep, you did it the way that I approve of. So yes, you're are a thru hiker, and like, yes, you are. Like, I have so many miles under my belt now, like both from doing the thru hikes and other, smaller adventures. I'm an outdoor professional and like lead and guide groups. That like I don't need that like to have felt fulfilled on.
Yeah, I just like hiking.
Yeah,
seeing as much as I can.
Yeah, and I get like for you having this channel and everything, like you're gonna see all the internet trolls and whatnot. So, so like, yeah,
whatever. Go ahead.
but yeah, so like that can be an extra pressure to have somebody feel like they need to do every step, or they need to see every blaze, or like keep that continuous footpath, or however it's phrased.
Right.
But yeah, like I just realized like I don't need that. Like I was having a great time. I enjoyed the way I do it. I still don't regret like skipping the sections I did, or doing that road walk, or like whatever. Like I had a great time.
But we both plan. I mean, I think you're planning. We're both planning on going back to do the sections that we missed. Now, my first fire was near Etna, and that was all the way to Syed Valley, which was like 100-mile skip of some sort. Like that.
Which I think was called the Shelley Fire.
Shelley Fire. Yeah. Yes, that is exactly the name. All of my Washington was kind of on fire, which was a big bummer. We met each other on the Oregon-Washington border, and he was just telling me how wonderful and beautiful this place was. Yeah. And I missed over half of Washington's 500 miles or whatever it ends up being.
I felt so bad for not only you, but the other northbounders that I'm having conversations, even if it's just 2-minute conversation passing on the trail, of like how epic their finish is going to be and how amazing Washington was. Like it very quickly overtook Maine as my favorite hiking state.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I did not think was going to be a thing.
Yeah, right? Like Maine has been a stamp in the book. Like, let's go to Maine.
But yeah, like I knew the sections like the North Cascades or the Sierras were going to be spectacular. But as an entire state, Washington was great, and so I felt so bad like hyping it up and like getting y'all really excited for it, and
for it to catch on fire.
And then you couldn't hike most of it.
Right. Let's switch gears again and go to gear choices.
Ooh, okay.
Did you have any considerations for the time you started for gear specifically? Like whether it be an ice axe or extra clothing, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So first of all, there is not a ton of information about hiking southbound for the PCT. There's some out there. You do have to go digging for it. I think Quadzilla. He's so good. Oh my gosh, that guy's like another level good. But he was like really one of the only like YouTube channels that I found that could give like solid advice of like what I could expect, and even like gear recommendations, and all these PCT like how to get ready pages. Like they're all geared towards northbounders because just like the AT,
a ton of NOBO information.
Yeah, it's like 80% or more of like the hikers that are out there. But anyway, so I didn't quite know what to expect, so I brought micro spikes with me. Did not end up bringing an ice axe. Because I didn't think I was necessarily going to need it like long term. And again, with my experience and my like sort of risk management and risk assessment, skill set and experience and all that, like I knew I could go out to an area, see if it was going to be too dangerous or too risky, and then turn around, like come back into town and grab gear if I needed to.
Right.
So yeah, never carried an ice axe, had micro spikes with me at the start. I had an extra layer, so I had an Alpha Direct hoodie and my puffy.
Aren't those great? Alpha Direct?
Gosh,
yeah. I really enjoyed mine.
Yeah, but like again, I very quickly hit a heat wave and wasn't using any of my layers. Sent the Alpha Direct one home early, and then got it back for the Sierra. And again, the Sierra, I had my bear canister sent back out. I had an extra battery bank sent back out, stuff like that. I had my micro spike sent back out, even though I literally didn't see any snow.
Lucky.
Oh my gosh, the Sierra were beautiful. I hit them in the fall, late September, going into October. The aspens were full golden bloom. Oh my gosh,
that's cool.
It was just spectacular. But otherwise, I was really trying to minimize the amount of sending packages back and forth across the country. Because even with like the flat rate boxes that are,
It can
$25,
get expensive.
yeah, it's just adding up. And then it's, the extra logistics of, okay, well, what if it's not at the post office? What if I get there and they're closed, or, whatever. So my gear, I really wanted to be good in Washington all the way through, good in the Sierra, all the way through, to Mexico.
I got my ice axe right before San Jacinto.
Okay.
At the Paradise Valley Cafe, along with my microspikes. And though I didn't need my ice axe until I reached San Jacinto, I needed the microspikes before that.
Sure. Which
was, just pretty crazy. I will say the year that I went in 2024 was one of a very high snow year in San Jacinto too. Lucky me. But I was glad to have experienced it. And I talk about this as I'm taking my microspikes off, as I'm heading downhill, that, I got a small taste of the Sierra at that point.
Yeah.
Very like going to Kittyland, you know what I mean? And getting the taste of that. Just, trying to figure out, how to work on slanted slopes, how to use your ice axe. I had no idea going into this thing. But
you didn't practice ahead of time?
Nowhere to practice. It was a warm winter in Pennsylvania. We have a hill over here down at the school that I was hoping to self-arrest and practice that, but literally no snow that year. So, I messed around in San Jacinto with a group. We all practiced, self-arresting before that, which is what I definitely recommend. But I felt like when I got to the Sierra, I was ready, but still surprised about how challenging the trail conditions were. How about water availability? I know for me, other than that one cache in the desert, I think I carried 3 liters in the desert with a capacity for 5.
Okay.
Rarely did I use 5.
Yeah.
And then in the Sierra, I actually lost one of my water bottles crossing a stream, so then I had 2. And then it stayed at 4-liter capacity because I had an Evernew 2-liter bag as a backup, just for camp water. Yeah. I was also using a bidet, so I needed a half extra liter just in case. But other than that, after the Sierra, I carried 4-liter capacity with mainly 2 water bottles. What about you?
Yeah, so
probably specifically the desert is what you want to talk about on this one.
Yeah. So vast majority of the trail from the Canadian border through the Sierra, I only had 2.5 liters capacity. Wow. I had a 1.5 liter smart water bottle on one side and a 1 liter. It was technically a body armor one, but a 1 liter water bottle that had the wide top for like
a soft bottle, or was it hard?
No, it was like it's a smart water bottle that has a wide top.
Oh, okay.
Is basically what it
was.
That's
cool. Okay.
But yeah, and I use that one for like my drink packets, my breakfast essentials, because the wide mouth is not only easier to pour the packets in, but just cleans out a lot easier in town and stuff.
Yeah.
That was all I had until I got to the desert. And at that point, I picked up an extra smart water bottle, and I had my CNOC bag.
Okay, so 2 liter CNOC?
3. So
3? Big one. Okay.
Yeah, so I had 6.5 liters of capacity.
Did you fill it up?
Sure did.
Wow. Okay, yeah, so completely different than me then.
Yeah.
Okay.
So really, I had 3.5 liters sort of minimum, leaving any of my water supplies, but normally I would put at least some in the CNOC, just because again, when I was going through, I didn't get the benefit of the recent snow melt or anything like that, so in some cases I was having to rely on the caches because otherwise I would have needed 10 liters of water. And again, I also had a bidet, so I needed a little bit of extra for that if it the stretch is gonna be if I'm gonna have to camp between these sources, and that takes extra water for cooking and cleaning and all of that sort of stuff. I definitely used the 6.5 liters a few different times, and there were definitely some times where I'd filled it up just to have it in case, and then would get to the next water source or water cache having 1.5 liters or 2 liters left. But that's a much better situation.
Oh, absolutely.
Than only being I need 4 liters, and then I needed 6. Right.
Exactly. So you'd say the desert is probably the only section that kind of differed between us.
Yeah. So there are sections, I believe, in southern Washington that sort of all of a sudden you'll southbounders will have a 12-mile water carry.
Yeah. Oregon was like that for us too.
Yeah. So I think that Southern Washington, Northern Oregon section, there's a few of those which caught me off guard.
We got spoiled in NorCal because it was everywhere. We carried like a half a liter, and then all of a sudden, we're like, what the heck? We got to carry 4 liters of water carrying back to camp. But it also depends where you camp too.
Sure. And yeah, so like once I hit that stretch, I was like, okay, I just need to pay attention to like not pass up. Because like you were saying, like in Northern Washington, like I had water all over the place.
Yeah.
Like I basically could have not carried a water bottle.
Right. Yeah. Drink from the stream.
But yeah, no, we'll get to that one. Yeah. I wouldn't recommend.
Right. Oh yeah, we got to talk about Giardia. Yeah.
Yeah. So I contracted that sometime at the end of the Sierra. So I'd gone up Whitney, had gone down into the town of Lone Pine to get a quick resupply. I also needed to replace my sleeping pad. I don't know if we'll have time to get into like gear and
probably not. This video is probably already an hour
long. But yeah, so replaced my sleeping pad, got resupplied, did all the town stuff. Came back out, and then that night I just felt miserable and just like having to scramble in and out of the tent multiple times and slowed me right down.
Right.
And so about 48 hours later, was in Canyon Meadows South. And started feeling a little bit better. I was like, okay, well maybe that was just like a food poisoning from being in town or something. So started hiking back out, like towards I can't remember the name of that pass, but it's like where the town of Ridgecrest is. And for me it was mile 2002.
Right.
And so it got there, still feeling like crap. Because when I like very shortly after leaving Canyon Meadows South, which everybody says is a town stop. It's not a town. It's a general store. Lovely general store. I'm glad it's there, along with Triple Crown Outfitters.
Yeah, I was at Grumpy's. He was at the general store. So we had different experiences there, too.
But yeah, like very, very glad that spot exists.
Well, wait, Grumpy's was closed for you.
Grumpy's, by that point in the season, was only open on the weekends. And I got there during the weekday.
Okay.
Yeah, so anyway, Canyon Meadows South, not the best place to, like, if you're sick and, like, need services or anything like that. So anyway, made it to whatever the name of that pass is, which I can't remember the name of, and went into Ridgecrest, went to the urgent care, got the antibiotics or antiparasitic, and literally cleared it up within 12 hours.
That's good.
So yeah, was, like, slowed down by that for, I think, a full week. But I was really, really concerned, like when I was going through that and being just so miserable.
And tired. It makes you tired.
Oh
too,
my gosh,
right?
yeah.
Like worn out. I've had it once.
Yeah, like I was literally hiking a quarter of a mile at a time and had to stop and take a break.
Well, let's talk about an important thing about this journey, which is why we're telling the story. You didn't not filter your water.
Correct. I filtered all of my water.
You don't know how you contracted. Right. You don't know how you contracted this waterborne illness. Right?
Yeah. So likely what happened is that I was not as careful as I could or should have been of putting my tops back on, or somehow untreated water got into my food or something. Right. So it is important to not only filter your water, sort of regardless of source and how clean you think it is and all of that, because you just never know.
Yeah, if you're like washing out your pot in the stream, or if you don't wipe your water bottle after you dip it in and fill up, it can potentially self-contaminate or cross-contaminate your your surface. Yeah.
So yeah, like even though I was doing sort of all of the right things, right, like these things can still happen. Right. But yeah, so that slowed me down. I was really worried that it was going to put me out for 2 to 3 weeks, because that's what happened
Lucky
with
and
our
Togs.
friend, Lucky and Togs.
Terrible. Yeah.
Who we also did most of the AT with, but they got Giardia and they couldn't come back on trail for like 2 weeks.
Right. Yeah, we left them in the whites when we got there.
Yeah.
Terrible.
So yeah, that was my big concern. Thankfully, was able to get the meds and cleared it right up. Yeah. Got back on trail.
Yeah. So just be careful. Wipe down the water bottles. It takes another couple seconds, but I've done it. He's done it now. It's not a fun. It's not fun.
It's not
at all. Luckily, I went home a day early, and I was at home when it hit. But I can't imagine being that tired while out on trail and just both ends kind of thing. Yeah.
It was the most miserable I've ever been, especially in the backcountry. 0 out of 10. Do not recommend.
Let's talk about trail magic. And I'm going to kind of ignore, I vlogged, so we had a whole bunch of people coming out of the woodwork and helping us out. I didn't get a lot of trail magic after hiker town, which is in the desert. It's right before the aqueduct. Mile 400, 500? I don't know. You went SOBO, so
yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah, somewhere around that. But how was your trail magic up to the Sierra, or was there any?
Yeah, so I got sporadic trail magic. I actually got it at Hart's Pass after hitting the border and coming back. Okay, cool. So yeah, they're a super awesome family. That said that they normally go out there, but typically later in the season when like a lot of the northbounders are coming through, but I guess had extra time or can't remember what the case was, but. Anyway, got fed there. Got fed, I think actually just before seeing you in Cascade Locks. And there was a group of hikers that had done it a year or two before. Met up with them there. Okay. So yeah, just sort of like random hit or miss there. I think one more elaborate setup in Oregon that I got. But yeah, most of the trail magic I saw was like during that time where the northbounders and southbounders are crossing. Okay. Which makes a ton of sense because, you know, trail angels that are potentially coming from like way off trail want to feed and meet as many people as possible. Right. So yeah, that's where most of it happened. But then most of my trail magic, you know, outside of that was just like seeing random like day hikers or weekend hikers that, you know, had extra food with them or, you know, whatever. And just like, you know, chatting with them about the trail and what I was doing and all that. I was like, oh, like, do you need extra food? Like I have all of this stuff. So yeah, got some of that, but definitely less of like the, you know, full setups at road crossings. And I think maybe you might have seen. Yeah.
I mean, before we entered the Sierra, I can't really put my finger on much more trail magic all the way north. In the desert, yeah, it happened, I'd like to say, you know, quite a bit. You know, coke in the bushes or the coke in the cacti here, coke in the cacti there.
That coke would say right where it was.
Oh yeah, and it was, you know, it was 80 degrees by the time you drank the thing. But you know, there was a cooler here and there in the desert, and you know, we got cheese dogs one day at one of the like the what are those little? No, they're not campgrounds. They're like parking spaces, and you can like. I can't remember what they are. But I've never seen them on the East Coast. It's like a West Coast thing. Okay. You can like drive your RV up and park there for free.
Yeah.
Those kind of places. Gotcha. But other than that, you know, everything was, you know, my awesome subscribers further north after the Sierra.
Yeah.
So.
Did you have the cooler under the bridge at Scissors Crossing?
I did.
Okay, yeah. So I also
the
got
extra
that,
water was
awesome.
great,
yeah,
and then I think there were a few snacks.
Yeah.
The greatest trail magic. What?
Oh, no, go ahead, because I think you were about to say the same as me.
No, probably not, because this is like totally out of the ordinary. The greatest trail magic I got was some extra ibuprofen.
Ooh, okay.
I had twisted my ankle really bad at before one of the state parks, and I was like. Just eating it like candy, just trying to make it to the next town.
Gotta have that vitamin I.
Yeah, and I was hurting so bad at that point. Like I couldn't believe I was literally walking on my ankle at that point. And I opened up one of them ammo cans. Yeah. And then it was a full like 180 pills
I know exactly
of ibuprofen.
What you're
I'm like,
talking about. Yep.
Thank you. And what's crazy is the guy that was filling those caches up took us into Etna a couple days later.
That's awesome.
Which was nuts. But
I actually met him as well. He was out
what was
trying
his
to
name
clear
again?
Oh gosh, you would
Cliff?
ask me.
Was it Cliff?
That sounds right, but I honestly can't remember.
Okay, yeah.
I wish I could. I'm terrible.
Such a great man. He was so cool.
Yeah, he does a ton to like keep those ammo boxes full.
Yeah, and battery. He put battery banks. Everything. It's such crazy, awesome magic out there. Whenever
in an area that is not very heavily populated. Like
like in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and so there's not a ton of people that have the ability to easily go out there.
Yeah.
No, what I was gonna say for my favorite trail magic. Was all of the angels doing the water caches.
Yes,
and whether it's, you know, up in Oregon or through any parts of California, like those were so huge and so needed in a lot of areas. And I think they go overlooked or at least, you know, somewhat underappreciated.
They are the truest form of the definition.
Because you know and transporting water, if you've never done it, is heavy and expensive.
And we're not talking like a gallon here or there. We're talking like 150
Yeah, like
gallons
in some
of
cases
water,
like
you know?
huge tanks, in some cases just like dozens and dozens of these gallon-sized jugs.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you are able, or if you are the ones doing that, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Because yeah, like that legitimately goes a lot further than like
A
being
lot
fed,
more than you probably think.
yeah. Than being fed the burgers or the hot dogs or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah, just some extra water.
But yeah.
Or a trash bag is, I always say that's, we hate carrying trash. If there's a bag in there that we can.
I always like a good trash can.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the waters were just so huge.
Yeah. How about socially?
Mhm.
I assume, I was in a bubble half the time, especially after the Etna fire. We just kept, getting squished together.
Yeah.
Every time there was a fire, everybody jumped to the same place. So,
Sure.
going SOBO, how is the social? Is there a social aspect? I guess is the question here.
So it is more difficult.
Okay.
I did not have a huge social experience.
Yeah.
So I met up with some hikers that I was hiking with for maybe a week in Washington, like enough to get like their names, numbers, and like somewhat connect with them.
Yeah.
But again, like I think like coming off trail for 2 weeks, after I think I was 600 miles in at that point, and hopping back on, like it, I was putting down some, for me, really big miles.
Yeah.
And like really wasn't seeing anybody. I think in that like month and a half after getting back on, I saw 5 other southbound hikers.
Wow.
So yeah, like not seeing it, and I could not figure out why. Like I didn't know if I was missing people when they were maybe going into town and I wasn't, or vice versa, or like if people were skipping ahead, which I did hear later on that was a thing that a lot of southbounders were skipping ahead.
Yeah.
To be able to make sure that they could do the Sierra, which is obviously like everybody's sort of like highlight of the trail, right? To then come back and do it later. But yeah, really didn't see a whole lot of people until I got about halfway through the Sierra, and then I caught back up with some people, hiked with them for a little bit. But then again, the fire jump, like everybody had sort of a different plan for like, oh no, I want to miss as little as possible, or I'm going to try to do the dangerous road walk, or like, oh no, I want to speed up my timeline, or like, whatever. Yeah. So at that point, it sort of split up.
Did you ever have a large fire bubble where you were having trouble finding campsites? Because I did.
No, so the only time not that I had trouble finding campsites, but like would get to a campsite and like had to make sure that I was taking up as little room as possible.
Yeah, I was happy to have a 1-person tent because that happened more times than I thought it would. Yeah.
Yeah, a 1-person tent was definitely like the right call.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a Durson, yeah, you're just greedy and
take up a football field worth of space.
No,
granted, they're great tents. Don't get me wrong, they're big.
They're really not that bad. Yeah. But yeah, at least you do need a large footprint. Anyway, that was also just like a running joke in like the far out comments and whatnot.
It was.
But yeah, so the only time that happened for me was, again, when I was having that bubble.
Mm-hmm.
So part of me being off trail for 2 weeks was I wanted to check out PCT days.
Yeah. Which I didn't get to do. It just didn't work out for timing wise.
Yeah. And so like I did that. And so like you have all these people coming back to wherever they hopped off the trail. And so like that next like few days to maybe a week after that, I was passing literally like 50 northbounders a day.
Yeah.
Which was crazy because I'd gone from like not seeing anybody to like, oh my goodness.
You remember what we did on the AT where we said, hey man, you're almost there. Went to the SOBOs. I did that to everybody. I taught Bigfoot to do it too. And he's like, really? You're going to say that? I'm like, absolutely. I think I said it to you as you were leaving too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But yeah, what was funny is
almost
like,
there.
I would, get to some of these sites with a whole bunch of northbounders, which was awesome because like, again, like I hadn't had too much of that like campsite, just like, hey, people hanging out, interaction. But obviously there's like this almost sibling rivalry.
Yeah, it's all in fun. Yeah, we respect each other, but it's
they'd
cool
be like,
to poke fun at them.
Yeah, but they, I turn up and like, oh, a stinky SOBO. I'm like, you've hiked how many more miles than me at this point? You're calling me stinky?
Yeah, the best part was whenever you met with us, it was like, hey guys, I'm cool to hang out with you, but you guys need to take a shower.
Oh my God, y'all are awful.
After a while, you just can't smell yourself.
Yeah.
How about, to wrap this video up, how about mentally? For me, I thought, just comparing real quickly the Appalachian Trail to the Pacific Crest Trail, mentally, the only problem for me was, just trudging through the snow on those hot days.
Sure.
setting aside the fact that I'm now a family man, I'm a dad, I'm a stepdad and father.
Yeah.
That was the hardest part mentally for me. But take that out of the equation, I thought the trail was a lot easier than the AT.
Oh, physically, physically, it's no question.
Yeah, physically, hands down, way easier than the AT.
So, yeah, I mean, and I know we disagree on trail maintenance, and I might have benefited from just being later in the season
Maybe,
and whatnot. Yeah, like for me, trail maintenance, like the slope and grade of the trail, because it's mostly graded for pack animal travel, like all of that, the weather-wise, the views, like it is physically a much easier trail than the AT. Like
I was very surprised at how much easier the PCT is physically compared to the AT, but on a mental level, what do you think?
So mentally,
we're not walking in the rain.
Sure. So for me, like again, like being in the outdoors and in the backcountry as much as I am, like none of those are mentally taxing. Right. Like I can put up with like the bad weather and like the potentially poor campsites and like all of that. Where I really struggled was, again, especially in that like 6 weeks of getting back on the trail after seeing my family and then not seeing anybody, and especially not anybody that like I continuously saw, and like really feeling like a sense of like homesick and lonely and all of that.
Yeah, you pretty much hiked alone the whole time.
Yeah.
Where I had Bigfoot since San Jacinto, pretty much.
Yeah. So yeah, like for me, that was the biggest struggle, and like, and meeting back up with people was awesome, and all of that. But yeah, like that, like I said, was definitely a hard part. And like, I think that combined with it being on the West Coast.
Yeah. So far, 3 different time zones, right?
Yeah. So it's a 3-hour difference for both of us,
right.
For family and stuff like that. So like, even when I get to town, like coordinating, trying to like
call before 7 o'clock.
All of that, like it's so much more difficult. So yeah, like all of that made it maybe mentally more difficult, and I had the hurricane, right?
Yeah.
So
your wife struggled on the basement flooding.
And like just the area getting devastated,
right? Yeah.
So yeah, like that, like Hurricane Helene hit my home area like right before I went into the Sierra.
Yeah.
So like the spot where I'm going to have the least accessibility, both for service and being able to like get out if I needed to get home quickly.
Being away was harder. The family wise is harder.
Yeah, for sure.
But like, you're seeing these beautiful views every day, and they, even on a bad day, it's kind of like lifting your spirits. Whereas, a bad day on the AT kind of looks like 20 degrees, rain, windy, you can't feel your fingers kind of thing. But like that doesn't.
And you don't see anything.
Yeah. And there's no views. And probably fog at some point. But on the PCT, I think, taking the family out of the equation, I think it was a lot easier mentally, hiking wise.
Yeah. The big thing that I hope people take away from this video, at least from like the southbound perspective, after hiking that trail southbound and having such great luck with like the weather windows, and fires were like not nearly as big of an issue for me as they were for most of the northbounders this past year. I don't know why more people don't go southbound. I think if you can go in shape and like go ahead and do 20 miles a day, highly consider going southbound, especially if it works for your timeline.
Plus the permits are easier to get, are they not?
Permits are so much easier. Like I got my exact start date. I had started July 3rd, in part because I needed to wait for the previous school year to wrap up and whatnot, which is why I went south. But July 3rd is also the date that we summited Katahdin.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. You kind of start the new adventure.
So yeah, like that date already meant a lot to me. But yeah, like huge advocate of like, if at least consider going southbound.
Right.
I don't know why more people don't, unless it is,
a timeline like I couldn't do SOBO. I had to be back before before September. Now, listening to your stories and hearing, some SOBO stories as well, looking into it more, Quadzilla and all that. I do think, having gone NOBO and have experienced this, I do think SOBO is probably the way to go as well. I totally agree with you. And I mentioned this in the videos when we started hitting the fires, because most of the fires that I encountered were either not started by the time you scooted through, or finished by the time you got there.
Yeah. And so for me, that was like being in a very specific window.
Right.
Yeah. Even going southbound, had I been a little bit ahead, a little bit behind, might have been different.
Right.
But yeah, I think especially, like I said, if you can come in shape, Washington is no joke. Like Washington is tough hiking, especially for the PCT. But in particular, if you've done another long trail and are an experienced hiker and know that you can come in, with at least some semblance of trail legs.
That's a good point.
Going southbound is definitely the way to go.
Yep. So let me know down in the comments which way you're thinking about. Are you going to be hiking it in 2025 or maybe 26, whatever? Let me know if SOBO's the way to go. I think it is. I really do strongly agree. Especially like you brought up, especially if you have, if you've done the CDT or the AT or some other long 500 plus mile trail, and you don't need to rely on other people to kind of show you things or show you the experiences. I think you're going to benefit a lot, SOBO.
Yeah, and that's a great point that you brought up. So the southern end of the trail, like if you go northbound, early on has a lot more resources. If you are new to the through hiking thing, or
more
if
logistics,
you are new to backpacking in general, there's a lot more towns and resupply points and people around to sort of help guide you through. Versus going southbound, I didn't have a problem with that because I know
he's already did it before,
But yeah, again, if you have some experience, if you're in shape, southbound I think is the way to go.
Yeah. Well, hey man, thanks for first of all, thanks for coming up and seeing me. That's awesome. And thanks for sitting down today to talk to everybody about SOBO versus NOBO. So
totally.
Yeah, guys, if you have any additional questions, I'll be monitoring the comments. Just leave them down below. And if I don't know something, you probably will, and we'll get back to you.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you on the trail. Thanks, man. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Oh, cool. That was fun.
It was. I agree.
Awesome.